Disowned and forgotten, I returned after 12 years and destroyed my family in shock. I never thought I'd be the person who brings down an entire wedding with a single flash drive, but life has a funny way of coming full circle. When I was 18, my family in Boston decided I wasn't worth keeping around anymore. It was the middle of winter in Massachusetts, freezing cold with snow piled high on the sidewalks. I remember standing on our porch, a single backpack of belongings at my feet, as my dad closed the door in my face. "You're nothing but a disappointment," were my mom's last words to me. A waste of our time and money. My sister, Olivia, just smirked from behind them. She was 16 then, the golden child, perfect in every way I apparently wasn't. What had I done to deserve this? I wasn't a straight-A student like Olivia. I wasn't interested in following my father into the family accounting firm. I wanted to study photography, something my parents called a hobby, not a career. But the real breaking point came when I refused to let them use my college fund, money my grandmother had left specifically for me, to pay for renovations on their vacation home in Cape Cod. "You're 18 now," my father had said coldly. "An adult. Figure it out yourself." And just like that, I was homeless in Boston with exactly $43.27 to my name. The first week was hell. I slept in a 24-hour laundromat, using my backpack as a pillow and washing up in public bathrooms. On day 8, exhausted and starving, I wandered into a small Irish pub called Sullivan's. The owner, Maggie, caught me trying to warm up without ordering anything. Instead of kicking me out, she sized me up and asked, "You know how to wash dishes?" That night, I slept on a cot in the storage room and ate the first real meal I'd had in days. Within a month, I was working full-time at Sullivan's, saving every penny. Maggie became the closest thing to family I had. "Listen, kid," she told me one night. "What your folks did was cruel. But don't you dare let it define you." Maggie's husband Sean had connections at community college, and they helped me get financial aid. I took photography classes during the day and worked at the pub at night. It wasn't easy, but I was surviving. 2 years later, I got my first big break. A local magazine loved my portfolio and hired me as a staff photographer. Then a bigger magazine in New York noticed my work. By 25, I was traveling the world shooting for major publications. At 27, I started my own media company specializing in corporate branding and documentary photography. By 30, I had offices in New York, London, and Toronto. All this time, I never contacted my family. But that doesn't mean I wasn't watching them. Through social media and mutual acquaintances, I kept tabs on their lives. My father's accounting firm in Boston had grown significantly. My mother had become a prominent socialite, chairing charity galas while treating the actual staff like garbage. And Olivia? Well, she was supposedly in law school at Harvard. Except she wasn't. Through a college friend who worked in Harvard's administration, I discovered Olivia had been kicked out for cheating during her second year. But somehow, she was still telling everyone she was about to graduate with honors and had a job lined up at a prestigious law firm. Even more interesting, I discovered my father's accounting firm was being investigated for tax fraud. They were cooking books for wealthy clients, helping them hide millions from the IRS. And the most shocking part? They were using my social security number and identity for some of their shadier dealings, thinking I'd disappeared and would never find out. For years, I quietly collected evidence, emails, documents, bank statements, all showing what they were doing. I wasn't planning revenge. I was protecting myself. If their fraud ever came to light, I didn't want to be implicated. That changed when I met Jake. He was a client initially, a tech entrepreneur who hired my company to rebrand his startup. Tall, with kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel warm inside, he was the first person I fully trusted since Maggie and Sean. On our third date, I told him everything about my family. "They sound like terrible people," he said simply. "They are. So why do you still have all that evidence against them? Why not just move on?" I couldn't answer him then. But 6 months later, when we were engaged, I finally admitted the truth. because someday I might need to defend myself against them. Jake understood. He'd grown up in foster care in Seattle after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. He knew what it meant to build your own family. We got married in a small ceremony in Vancouver. Maggie and Sean flew in from Boston. My chosen family was small but real. Then, last month, I received an invitation that made my blood freeze. Not addressed to me directly, it was sent to my company's general address. It was for Olivia's wedding to William Preston, son of Gregory Preston, one of the wealthiest real estate developers in New England. The invitation wasn't meant for me. It was a business solicitation. They wanted my company to photograph the event, not knowing who owned it. Someone on Olivia's team had seen our work and added us to their vendor outreach, completely unaware of the connection. I sat staring at that gold-embossed card for hours, my mind racing. Jake found me still holding it at midnight. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. I looked up at him, the man who had helped me rebuild my life. "I'm thinking it's time." The Preston estate in Newport, Rhode Island was exactly as pretentious as I expected. Sprawling oceanfront property, manicured gardens, and a ballroom that could fit 300 people easily. I arrived dressed not as a photographer, but as a guest. My black designer dress was understated but expensive, my hair styled professionally, diamond earrings, a gift from Jake, catching the light. Jake was by my side in a tailored suit, his hand steady on my back. We walked through the entrance, past security who barely glanced at us once they saw our forged invitation cards. The ceremony had just finished, and guests were mingling for cocktail hour before the reception. And then I saw them, my family, standing in a small circle near the front of the room. My mother, her face more pinched than I remembered, more Botox than before. My father, his hair grayer, but still standing with that same arrogant posture. And Olivia, in her white dress, laughing with her new husband, William. For a moment, I froze. 12 years of anger, hurt, and determination condensed into a single heartbeat. "You okay?" Jake whispered. I nodded. "Let's go say hello." My mother saw me first. Her champagne glass paused halfway to her lips, her eyes widening in shock. Then my father turned, his face draining of color. "Hello," I said calmly, as if I'd just seen them yesterday. "Lovely wedding." "What are you doing here?" my mother hissed, recovering quickly. "How did you get in?" Olivia spun around, her perfect smile faltering. "Who invited you?" "I did," I replied smoothly. In a manner of speaking, William, Olivia's new husband, looked confused. "Do you know each other?" "Oh, William," I said, tilting my head. "Has Olivia never mentioned her older sister?" The silence was delicious. William's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. "Sister?" "Liv, you told me you were an only child." My father stepped forward. "This is a private event." "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Jake's hand tightened on my waist. "We're not going anywhere." "And who are you?" my mother demanded. "Her husband," Jake answered simply. Another wave of shock rippled across their faces. The idea that someone would marry me, that I wasn't alone and desperate as they'd imagined, clearly hadn't occurred to them. Olivia recovered first, her face morphing into a condescending smile. "Well, how nice. But this is my wedding day, and quite frankly, you weren't invited for a reason." "Actually," I said, reaching into my clutch, "I have some wedding gifts I thought you might appreciate." I pulled out a small USB drive. "This contains something I think William might find interesting." "What is that?" William asked, frowning. "Just proof that your new wife isn't a Harvard law graduate like she claims to be. In fact, she was expelled for cheating in her second year." I turned to Olivia, whose face had gone pale. "Isn't that right, Liv?" "That's a lie," she snapped, but her voice wavered. "Is it?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then you won't mind if William looks at these documents from Harvard's disciplinary board?" My father stepped between us. "That's enough." "Security." "Dad," I said calmly, "you might want to hold off on that. Because this USB also contains evidence of how your accounting firm has been committing tax fraud for the past decade." I paused. Including how you've been using my social security number and identity to open fraudulent accounts. The color drained from his face. You're bluffing, my mother whispered. Am I? I smiled. Why don't we find out? William's confusion had turned to anger. He snatched the USB from my hand. What the hell is going on, Olivia? Nothing. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me. Olivia's voice was rising, drawing attention from nearby guests. William turned to a nearby laptop that was set up for the wedding slideshow. He plugged in the USB while Olivia tried to stop him. William, please, she's making this up. But it was too late. The screen showed exactly what I'd promised. Official Harvard documents showing Olivia's academic dishonesty case and expulsion. Then bank statements, emails, and tax documents showing my father's firm's fraudulent activities, including accounts opened in my name. William's face hardened as he scrolled through the files. You lied to me. About everything. I can explain, Olivia began. Explain what? William cut her off. That you're not a lawyer? That your father's business is built on fraud? That you've been lying to me our entire relationship? By now, a small crowd had gathered, including William's father, Gregory Preston. What's going on here? The elder Preston demanded. William turned to his father, his voice tight with anger. It seems I've been deceived, Dad. About who I was marrying. Gregory Preston looked at the screen, then at my father, his expression darkening. John, is this true? You've been cooking books for clients. My father was sweating now. Greg, I can explain, you've been handling my company's finances for 15 years, Preston growled. Things escalated quickly after that. Preston called his lawyer on the spot. Other guests who were clients of my father started asking questions. Olivia was sobbing, mascara streaming down her face as William removed his wedding ring and dropped it on the floor. The wedding's off, he announced to the stunned room. I apologize to everyone for the inconvenience. With that, he strode out, his parents following after giving my family disgusted looks. In the chaos that followed, my mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. You've ruined everything, she hissed. Are you happy now? I carefully removed her hand. I didn't ruin anything, Mom. You all did that yourselves. I just brought the truth to light. We're your family, she said, a desperate edge to her voice. No, I replied softly. You stopped being my family the moment you threw me out like garbage. The wedding dissolved into chaos. Guests whispered and pointed. Some left immediately, while others lingered to witness the drama unfold. Olivia had collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably as her picture-perfect day and life crumbled around her. My father was cornered by several angry clients who had seen enough on that USB drive to question their own financial situations. Gregory Preston had already called both his lawyer and, from what I overheard, the IRS. My mother stood frozen, her social standing disintegrating before her eyes. And me? I felt strangely calm. The revenge I had never actively planned but had always kept as a possibility had played out better than I could have imagined. A man in an expensive suit approached us, Thomas Jenkins, the district attorney for the state of Massachusetts. He had been a guest at the wedding. Mrs. He began, looking at me. Walker, Jake supplied. My wife keeps her professional name separate. The DA nodded. Mrs. Walker, I couldn't help but notice what just happened. If what I saw is accurate, I'd like to speak with you about your father's firm. Identity theft is a serious crime, as is tax fraud. I handed him my card. I'd be happy to cooperate with any investigation. As the DA walked away, my sister somehow found the strength to approach me, her beautiful wedding dress now wrinkled, her makeup smeared. Why? She whispered. Why today? Why like this? For the first time, I felt a twinge of, not regret, exactly, but acknowledgement of the human cost of what I'd done. I didn't plan this, Olivia. I didn't seek out your wedding. Your team contacted my company not knowing I owned it. I paused. But when the opportunity presented itself, I took it. Just like you and Mom and Dad took every opportunity to push me down. We were just kids, she said, her voice breaking. You were 16 when they threw me out, Olivia. Old enough to know right from wrong. You stood there and smirked while they made me homeless. I was stupid. Selfish. Yes, you were. And you've been lying to everyone ever since. About Harvard, about your career. She looked down. I failed out. I couldn't handle the pressure. Dad was so disappointed and I couldn't bear it. One lie led to another and then I couldn't stop. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That feeling of not being good enough? Of disappointing them? I lived with that my entire childhood, Olivia. The difference is, I built myself up without lying about who I was. My father stormed over, his face purple with rage. You've destroyed this family. Jake stepped between us. That's close enough. My father glared at him, then at me. You think you've won? You think this makes you better than us? I am better than you, I said quietly. Not because I'm successful or because I've exposed your fraud. I'm better because I didn't let what you did to me turn me into someone like you. My mother joined him, her voice cold. You were always ungrateful. Always difficult. This just proves we were right to cut you out. I laughed. Actually laughed. Is that really what you're taking from this moment? That you were right to throw your teenage daughter out into the street in winter? I shook my head. You know, for years I wondered what was wrong with me that my own parents couldn't love me. Now I realized the problem was never me. Security was approaching now, summoned by someone. Probably my father. We should go, Jake murmured. I nodded, but turned back to my family one last time. The IRS and FBI will be in touch about the identity theft and tax fraud. I've already been cooperating with them for months. This, I gestured around the ruined wedding, was just a bonus. My father's face went from red to white. You're lying. Check your email in about an hour. The official investigation notice should be there by then. As Jake and I walked away, Olivia called after me, her voice broken. Will I ever see you again? I paused but didn't turn around. I don't know, Olivia. That depends on whether you become someone worth seeing. Outside, the summer air was warm against my skin. Jake and I walked silently to our rental car, hand in hand. You okay? He asked as we pulled away from the estate. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. You know what? I really am. What now? I smiled, looking out at the ocean as we drove along the coastal road. Now we go home. To our real family. Jake reached for my hand. Maggie and Sean are expecting us for Sunday dinner next week. Perfect, I said. And it was. The family I had chosen. My husband, Maggie and Sean, my friends and colleagues, they were more family than the people who shared my DNA had ever been. That night, back in our hotel room, I finally deleted the folder on my computer labeled Family Evidence. I didn't need it anymore. The truth was out, justice would take its course, and I was finally completely free. As I closed my laptop, Jake handed me a glass of champagne. To closing chapters, he said. I clinked my glass against his. And to writing new ones. And that's how our narrator finally closed the chapter on her painful past. After 12 years of watching from afar, collecting evidence not for revenge, but for self-protection, she found herself with the perfect opportunity to bring the truth to light. And when that moment came, she didn't hesitate. What's fascinating about this story isn't just the satisfying moment of justice at the wedding, but the journey our narrator took to get there. From sleeping in a laundromat with nothing to her name, to building a successful international media company, she didn't just survive, she thrived. And she did it honestly, working her way up without the shortcuts and frauds her family relied on. I think there's an important lesson here about family. As our narrator realized, family isn't always about blood relations. Sometimes, the family we choose, like Maggie and Sean who took her in, or Jake who loved her unconditionally, can be more meaningful than the family we're born into. Real family supports you, believes in you, and would never throw you out into the cold because you didn't fit their perfect image. There's also a powerful message about patience and justice. She didn't seek revenge immediately. She built herself up first, became strong and successful in her own right. And when the moment for truth finally came, it wasn't just about hurting them, it was about exposing lies that needed to be revealed. I'd love to know what you think. Would you have done the same if you were in her position? Would you have exposed your family at the wedding, or would you have approached it differently? Or would you have just let it go and moved on with your life? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. See you next time.